In this video, we'll do an overview of the OKUMA GENOS L250 control. Now, this control is an OKUMA OSB P300LA-E. This area here is the display screen, obviously. Down below the display screen, we have these function keys, F1 through F8. These are all associated with various functions that you see above the key. We can extend that and get other functions. Probably go through it about 2 or 3 times and you'll get back to the original screen. Over here on the left side, we have 2 USB ports that we use to upload and download programs to the control. On the screen, you may have noticed that there are displayed icons here that show you the condition of the machine, various aspects of the machine. One that I do want to make note of is this one right here. This one's currently highlighted. These are not highlighted, but this one is highlighted. And that is the one that shows us that we are at the machine limits. And that's as far as the machine's movement is concerned. In the Z-axis and the X-axis, this is showing us that we're at one of the limits. Let me take it off the limits and show you what I mean. I have to go to manual mode, move away, and now as you can see, it's no longer highlighted. So here, this is just telling me that the machine is not on any of its limits, its movement limits. So I'm going to move this back in the Z. Now it is currently on the Z limit. It just shows one icon. I'm going to go ahead and move back to the X limits as well. That's important because we have got to be on the limits in order to do certain functions, like rotate the turret manually. Okay, there's several other things on here. You also may notice that we have 3 tabs here. Okay, those 3 tabs, it depends on what display you're on. There may be 2 tabs, or could be 3. Could be no tabs. This particular display that we're currently on is the operator display, and this display has 3 tabs. And the first tab is actual position. There's actually 2 pages to this tab. We'll get into that later. This tab here is Spindle setup. This is where we go to establish a work 0 on the machine. And this tab here is used for setting up the tailstock. Let me go back to the actual position tab. Okay, and we're going to be using those as time goes on. Let's move down to this area here of the machine. What we have here first, and some of the most important buttons on the control, are the mode buttons. And these are all the mode buttons right here. These 3 here are the primary modes of operation, and these 5 buttons here are the secondary modes of operation. The primary modes of operation are automatic. Automatic is the mode we use to actually cycle through a program automatically. MDI, which stands for manual data input. This allows us to run single line functions, much like we would automatically, but we use this mainly for setup purposes. Manual mode. Manual mode is just for moving the machine around for setup purposes mainly. Let's get into the secondary modes. This first one here is the operator display mode. And this is the mode that we started out with here on the machine. This is a mode where we can perform lots of setup functions, like setting up the spindle setup, which is where we would set the 0 offset on the machine. We'll have a specific video for that later. Or we could go over here and we could set up the tailstock. Let's get back to this display screen here. So that's the operator display. Some people at OKUMA call that the easy off display. It's a very important mode or display because we use this for pretty much everything. It's probably the most used display on the machine. Let's go to the next one. This mode is called Edit. This is where you do all your file management. You can download programs to the machine, upload back to a USB drive. We can copy programs, rename programs, Basically anything that has to do with file management, we do in the edit mode. The next mode of operation here is the tool data mode. This is the mode we use to set up all of the offsets. This has a 12 station turret on it, and each of those 12 tools must have an X and a Z offset associated with them that the operator is going to have to set up. And so this is where we go to set up all those offsets. Parameter mode. Parameter mode is used more by advanced operators and maybe maintenance personnel to establish safety positions on the machine, and there's a number of other things you can do in this mode. Typically, we're not going to be using this for this class. We may get into some of this as time goes on later in the second year of the program. The next mode here, MacMan, that stands for Machine Management. This is where you can manage all kinds of important things on the machine. This is really not used by us. This is more production-oriented technology. We don't really use it. We don't really run production here at the college. So let me go back to the easy operator display mode. So let's get into the rest of the keypad. These two buttons right here, all they do is move you from one tab to another. I can just simply hit this button and navigate between tabs. I don't even really need to use these since I can touch the tab. This is a touch screen. But nevertheless, a lot of people are finicky about fingerprints. Okay, down here we've got page up and page down, and then the arrow keys to navigate. We have the alphabet over here, a numerical keypad over here. All of these work for the most part just like your keyboard on a PC. This button over here is enter. Some people might call that input. This button right here, BS, it's backspace. So had I typed in some incorrect information, I could just hit this, very similar to how I would on a keyboard on a PC. Typically on a keyboard, it's up over here in this area. On the control, it's right here, backspace. Let's move down to the bottom part of the control. Here we have the E-stop, emergency stop. It basically cuts all electrical power to the machine and all the motors. Effectively stops everything on the machine. Only used for emergencies. We have other ways that we can stop the machine just to pause it from time to time. These two buttons here, cycle start, feed hold. Cycle start is used to start running a program, or executing a program automatically. I would have to be in automatic mode, and I would have had to have done a proper setup on the machine, and then I would be able to start cycling a program automatically. A program is made up of many blocks. Each line in a program is considered to be a block of information. And when I'm cycling the machine, it runs one block at a time and just continues on block by block automatically. Feed hold just pauses the operation of the program. It also stops the machine where its current position is. So as I'm cycling a program automatically, I can press feed hold, and let's say I want to check a tool clearance or something. I want to check to make sure things are in a safe position or condition on the machine. I could pause it, take a look inside the window. If everything looked good, I could hit cycle start and just continue on. So that's how these buttons work. This kind of works like a play button. This works like a pause button. All of these keys here all the way down, and including this one, and possibly including this one, these all have to do with the movement of the machine. Now, this is jogging the machine, so I would have to be in manual mode in order to actually use any of these keys here. But manual mode, and now I can use this as one section and one way to move the machine. Okay? The only buttons that are actually usable on this portion are X and Z, and then these three jog speeds. This is a simple 2-axis lathe, so C, Y, and W are just not used on this machine. So X, Z, I can pick one or the other, and that enables me to move that particular axis using the pulse wheel. And as I said a minute ago, these are only for adjusting how fast and how accurately I can move the slide per pulse. So this pulse wheel actually has, you can feel it as you're moving it, clicks. And so we would consider that to be a pulse, and each pulse is moving based on whatever current speed I have selected here. Okay, these down below here are press and hold jog button. What's happening in this area is independent of this. Down here you get whatever direction you press. So if I press this direction, I'm going to get a Z negative direction. If I press and hold this button, Z positive. Press and hold this button, X positive, X negative. I can control the speed using these by selecting a different override rapid speed here by percentage. I could cut this down to 30% rapid, which we use pretty often when we're proofing out programs. While I'm in manual mode and I'm jogging, this slows down how fast these buttons will move the machine. Now I'll put it back at 100%. Let's move over here. I'm going to highlight 3 buttons. Okay, so I've highlighted single block, block skip, and optional stop. Single block. Single block is a mode that I go in sometimes while I'm proofing out a program. I would be in automatic mode. In single block, press cycle start. And what the machine would do with this enabled, single block, is it would execute one block, move to the next block, and stop. And so this is going to run one block at a time. You know, if I had multiple lines of code, I would have to hit this to execute every single line of code. Single block mode. Okay. This mode here, block skip. A block skip is a forward slash placed at the beginning of a block or any line of code. If I place a forward slash on a line of code, and this is enabled, and I run this automatically, it will just skip any block of code that has a forward slash in front of it. You can strategically use that for all kinds of things. Block skip. You don't really use it that much, but once in a while, you know, it comes in handy. This mode down below, optional stop, is currently enabled. There are 2 M codes associated with stopping the machine automatically while you're running a program. M00 and M01. An M00 is a forced stop. If I place an M00 somewhere in a program and I execute that program by hitting cycle start automatically, when it gets to that block, the machine will just stop. It'll act just like I pressed feed hold. And then it'll stay there until I hit cycle start again. So that's a forced stop. The other M code that I can use to stop the machine is an optional stop, an M01. If I were to place an M01 in the program and I was running in automatic mode, if optional stop is enabled, when it gets to that M01, it will stop there and treat it just like an M00. If I disable this, I get to a line of code with an M01 on it, it will ignore it. We use that a lot for setting up the machine. We may have an optional stop just prior to every tool change. We use that pretty often on milling machines as well. But anyway, that's what that is. Okay, these 2 buttons here are dead. These are A and B. This control can be used on a machine that has 2 turrets. This only has a single turret, so it only runs one program at a time, and so they're unused on this machine. All right, let's take a look at this button here, the Eco Idle Stop. That just puts the machine in power save mode. Turns the light off, turns some other things off on a machine. Let's go up here to Dry Run. Dry Run is a mode that we typically do not use on the machine. In fact, generally speaking, most people do not use dry run mode. Somebody might say that they're dry running a program, but they don't necessarily mean that they're using this function on the machine. We're not going to use it for this class. Machine lock, we are going to be using. Notice how when I press this machine lock button, I get a little highlight on the IL button, the interlock release button here. And what that means is, in order to activate machine lock, I have to press and hold interlock and then press it. And so now that that is enabled, I've effectively locked the machine out. It physically cannot move anywhere. The spindle can't start. I can't jog the machine around. It won't move if I try to automatically run a program. I pretty much locked out all movement of the machine. We use that for setup purposes. We use that to run graphics, and we'll see more on that later in Locker. These two buttons here are associated with the coolant functionality. This one here, all coolant off, basically cuts all the coolant on the machine. The machine coolant pump will not start no matter what mode I'm in or how I try to start it when this button is activated. It's very cool. In the past, some of the older machines, they didn't have that. I mean, you could really be standing right in front of the machine, turn the coolant on manually, which is what this button does, and you would just spray yourself with coolant. Really fun. Anyway, since this is on the machine and activated, the coolant will not come on no matter what. Got to be a little careful here though. Since this is activated and so is this, if I deactivate this, that's going to force the coolant to turn on and just plaster my pants with coolant. I'm going to make sure I turn that off first, then I'll disable that. Okay, this just turns the light inside the machine on and off. Air blow, we don't have that. This button here we are not going to use, machine operation. This button here, sequence restart, we will be using that from time to time. That'll be on a one-on-one instructor and student basis. I'll show people how to use that as needed. We talked about everything else here. This right here just overrides the feed rate on the machine. It modifies the travel speed while you're running in automatic. These two buttons here are for rotating the turret for setup purposes. You know, you may be installing tooling or possibly trying to take a face cut. Whatever it is you're doing to finish your setup, you may need to go from one tool to another. And also, in order to set up the tool offsets, you will have to bring whatever tool that you're setting up or setting its X and Z offsets into the cutting position. More on that later, but we'll use these really often. Okay, these buttons here are for a door that opens and closes. These two buttons are not used on this machine. Over here, this is all the functionality for the spindle. Spindle stop button. If the spindle is rotating, you press that, it stops it. Mainly while you're in manual mode when you'll be using this, when you're setting up. Stop button, we don't really use this button. These two allow me to start the spindle either clockwise or counterclockwise. This allows me to jog the spindle. It works much like a manual lathe jog button. Maybe used for setting up a workpiece or dialing something in. Indexing just indexes to the orientation position and then holds it there. Show you how to use that at some point. And this here is just an override for the spindle based on a percentage. We'll leave that at 100%. Over here we've got some buttons that we've already looked at. First of all, the control on button. We saw that when we did the startup procedure. Control off, we saw that in use when we shut the machine down. This button here is just the reset button. If you have some kind of an alarm on the machine, this will typically reset it.